and they couldn't figure out why. And during these studies that he was having, he came to a conclusion that he believed that there was some invisible exogenous body that was being introduced to the female patients. And there was a way to eliminate that. And through his studies and his experiments, he figured that washing people's hands in a particular way to decontaminate the hands was, through his statistics that he was able to see, helping people be able to survive childbirth. And he presented all of his findings. Everything was statistically sound, but unfortunately, the field, they rejected it. They said that it didn't make any sense, that they were healers, and that there was no way that they could be the cause of the people dying. And they would not accept that happening, regardless of what his statistics said, because of how they felt. And there was this bias against what he was trying to do. 10 years went by. They were starting to get some backing behind his research. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to be alive when it was fully adopted. But his work was the foundation to allow for us to move from physicians over here kind of wandering around the farm and then just go straight into the surgery room to help people, to surgeons going and scrubbing down and being completely ready to be in a sterile environment to ensure that they were not complicating people's procedures. And what we see with this example is that there are issues that can happen to prevent innovations from getting to patients, which is ultimately what we're trying to do, is help the patient. So just to go over a little bit of the agenda, what I'm trying to do today, we're going to be discussing what the problem might be in our current modern day, go over the research questions and the purpose of this study, my models and hypotheses, and so on and so forth. Very excited to be sharing this with all of you. So first of all, I wanted to talk about why do we have innovations to begin with. Just like we saw with Dr. Semmelweis, these innovations are important to promote improved outcomes for patients. There are research studies like these that show that the adoption of innovations in hospital systems are what lead to overall improved outcomes. So, I mean, if it's that simple, then what's the issue? Well, some of it comes with the theory of innovation diffusion here, and I'm using specifically Moore's version of it, where he introduced something called the chasm. And so it follows marketing theory, marketing principles, wherein when something brand new is introduced into an environment, a landscape, it usually will need people who are innovators and early adopters, these enthusiasts, to grab this innovation and kind of support it and buoy it through what Moore called the chasm. If the innovation is able to survive this and make it to the mainstream market, then the majority of the people, oh, you know what, that looks great, fantastic, let's go ahead and adopt this and make things better. We like this. But unfortunately, in the field of healthcare, right now, we are seeing a 17-year gap. That's a long time for something to be caught in a chasm waiting to be adopted. There are a lot of different issues, and it's such a complicated matter that unfortunately there's not the time or breadth within this study and this project to speak fully about it. But there are things that we can talk about, and some of the things that in my reviews I pinpointed in on what might be causing this 17-year gap. Also, according to this research by Morris, they suggested that there are some surgical procedures that take up to 50 years before they are fully adopted into the mainstream. And meanwhile, all of us patients are sitting here just waiting and waiting for those amazing miracles to happen to our lives and improve our healthcare. So we have in my computer froze up. Okay. In my initial exploratory interviews, what was happening was I was seeing a lot of, like I mentioned, a lot of different variables, a lot of different feelings, a lot of different reasons why some of these physicians were feeling this was happening. And initially, I started looking at a research by Dr. Amir Casey. And he was talking about how there are two tribes. There's the tribe of physicians and the tribe of management. And I was thinking, oh man, I'm doing a DBA, and this is about management physicians. This feels like it might be a perfect fit to just kind of slide in, and this would be my project. But as I was reading his research paper, something kept coming at me and kept making me think, but why? And that big issue was they kept saying management sees things like this, physicians see things like this, and that's just how it is. And I thought, well, I mean, there has to be more to it than that. It's just not. But why? Why do they see things like that? And I came down to the thought it must be training. Something in the training pathway is causing people to come out a certain way. So we're seeing here this model of decision making, and we're seeing how in this particular study in Indonesia, they were able to go and statistically see that the majority of the physicians in the study were going to react and act a certain way. And for me, I was just thinking, how is that possible? How is it that, and you can find these SEMs in every profession, people trying to analyze and figure out what's going on. And I was thinking, okay, but just like in every profession, there are people who come from multiple facets of life, of various backgrounds. And yet, once they're in the program, in the system, they assimilate. They start becoming what the program wants them to be. So I figured there has to be something more to it. And I found there were a lot of, there were a lot of quotes, a lot of things, but this one right here in the middle was what really struck me as encapsulating a lot of what I was thinking about. This quote here says, by striving to develop the skills and traits required for our desired specialty, which is, I'll explain that in a second, we can transform ourselves, physician trainees, into the people we aim to be regardless of our current personality. And the title of the paper is Why I Won't Base My Specialty Choice on My Personality. And I was thinking, personality seems to be such an important thing that we can bring with us to help amplify what we're trying to do for people who are wanting to become physicians. Why would you want to forget your personality? This is saying, hey, come in, assimilate, become part of the collective, and whatever the specialty wants you to become, be that. And this got me pinpointing my sights on a couple of different theories. We have the theory of planned behavior as well as the framework for attraction selection. This variant on the screen right here includes attrition. There are reasons for the slight variation. But those two, I feel, are, and I'll go into these in just a moment, these two theories, I feel, help us understand what happens in this process of medical students moving into their residency specialty and then becoming physicians, and how that affects innovation adoption. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is, what is residency? What is that, for those who don't know? So in the medical field, you go through your pre-medical prerequisites to apply and get qualified to go to medical school. Then you go through 4 years of training at your medical school. Once you finish, you then are able to choose what specialty you will train in for the next 4 to 9 years, depending on the track you go. And with that, you enter into what is called residency training. Some of the history behind that is people used to literally live at the hospital as a resident, and so they were in residency. Just like when we would travel here to the executive DBA, we were in our residencies because we lived here on campus, especially for people like me who were traveling from afar. So these residents, they pick their specialty and they're all excited. They're able to say, hey, I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here. What is it that, what do I need to do? And there's research that talks about how there are different outcomes for people based on the different specialties that they get matched into. But we're able to see again, they come from different backgrounds. They are people from different countries, and yet they go into the residency specialties, and to a T, people within OBGYN have similar outcomes to other people in OBGYN. So that keeps us informed on what direction we might be saying, okay, so how do these factor in and how do these affect ultimately our goal of saying, does this have anything to do with innovation adoption? This one here was a very important framework for guiding the pathway this study went. In a nutshell, what we're talking about here with the attraction selection framework is people get attracted to a certain profession, maybe medicine, and specifically here, after they finish medical school, they are then peacocking themselves to different residency programs, hoping to say, hey, accept me, accept me. It's a very competitive process. And some of the people who apply are not able to get into the residency they want because they don't have all of the different peacock feathers that some of the programs are looking for. And so they're trying their best to be attractive to these programs. And it's the people, the residency program directors and their admissions committees who are accepting people and looking for people with cut from a certain cloth. And so there's research that has been shown that over the past 5 to 10 years, the amount of lies and exaggerations in CVs for people to get into these residency programs have increased. And because they have increased, these people are trying to change themselves, make themselves look like they're somebody they originally were not, so they can fit in and get into these residency programs. And then here's the kicker. There's research showing that once into these programs, these people start saying, hey, you know what? I don't really associate. I don't really connect with people outside of this field that I'm in. They change their social groups. They start acting and behaving the way that they're in their residency programs. But then we also have issues like this. We have the theory of planned behavior, and it talks about how our behaviors can be predicted and looked upon based upon backgrounds that we have. So what is it that is so special? So what is this phenomenon happening during the process of residency training where you go in, you might be an international medical graduate, which means that you went to a medical school in a different country, graduated, but then you're starting residency here in the United States. You come from a completely different culture, and yet the statistics, the studies say that for the most part, people are assimilating into their residency programs, their chosen specialties, and behaving a certain way. So going back to our theory of innovation adoption, I started thinking about those tech enthusiasts, those outliers, was it 15% who are outside. They're the ones who are the innovative thinkers. They're the ones who get brand new, shiny, amazing things that are going to make healthcare and medicine better, and they support them through that chasm and help them survive so that they can get into the mainstream. So that this model here, this SEM, they might be the outliers that don't quite fit. What are their characteristics? Going back to the theory of planned behavior in the previous slide. What of their background factors exist that help them become different? And is it good to be different? We'll talk about that in a moment because I ordered the slide differently. But what are some of the things that do make you different, and does it affect? Do we have real world evidence of these factors, these background factors affecting? We see this fine young gentleman here. He went through the rigors of going through the pre-med process. He dominated the MCAT. He took step 1 and step 2, the qualifying board exams to be able to become a physician. And he made it into a residency program in Boston, which suggests that it was connected to Harvard. He was a fine student. And yet, because of his race, something that was an outward thing that made him the other, he was not fully assimilated and accepted into the program. And he eventually left his residency program, did not finish to become a fully licensed physician because he didn't fit in. And then here is the story of another physician who went through something similar.
This for me has probably been the most traumatic experience that I've experienced in my life. She's trying to move forward in the fight against a racist and discriminatory environment. That's how Dr. Princess Dinner described Tulane University's medical school. The harm that Tulane has caused me, as well as other LifeHop faculty and students and residents, is tremendous. Dr. Ditto started working at the med school in 2008, becoming the first Black woman to head the internal medicine pediatrics program. She says things have been questionable from jump. I interviewed with the chairman of the internal medicine department, who is now the dean of the medical school, Dean Ham. And one of the things that was stated at that time was that they didn't want to change the face of Tulane, and that they felt that medical students would not rank favorably a program that had a Black program director. Throughout the years, Dr. Dinner said she saw the injustice being done to her, other Black physicians, as well as patients. She filed this federal lawsuit against the medical school in October 2020, accusing Tulane of discrimination and, quote, creating a race and gender-based hostile environment. The acts, the constant barrage of discriminatory acts really makes me feel like a second-class citizen. Fast forward to this summer, July 2021, Tulane's graduate medical education programs placed on probation by a national accreditor. In this letter from the dean, it lists several things for them to work on, including strengthening the institutional oversight and their commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Dr. Dinner says she's in this fight to win it all, and all she wants is
justice. It cuts off for some reason. Yeah. So she talked about her race and her gender. There are, and if you want to bore yourself, you can go through my literature review afterward. I have a lot of citations and a lot of different, and it's unfortunate that we have so many studies showing this, people being biased against for their race, for their gender, for these outward tokens showing how they are different from what the base template that the people who created an institutionalized oppression are promoting. We see even here this other study, how male physicians who are in sports medicine are receiving far less guff, far less Black than their female counterparts. These people who are of these minority classes, these biased groups, they can't assimilate because as the attraction selection frameworks say they could, because they have constant reminders of who they are, constantly being reminded, oh, you're brown, you're different than us, and so they can't. However, is that a good thing? Do we have a positive from this that can be gleaned? All right. There is research, specifically by Elsess and Graves, that talk about how diversity in leadership teams create better outcomes for their teams that they are leading. And we know in healthcare that the physicians are supposed to be the leaders of their healthcare team. So the idea was, if we have some items like gender or race or whatnot that are able to survive the attraction selection framework and make it into the practicing physicians, and that diversity that they have, breaking from the mold from the rest of their specialty, can help improve outcomes for their teams because they're thinking outside of the box. It's unfortunate that they're thinking outside of the box because of oppression, but, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, maybe we can harness that and do something with it to include healthcare and make that these innovative successes more commonplace in all hospitals. So the research questions after this background. Does the specialty that a physician pursues in their training affect their tendency to adopt innovations in their medical practice? As well as, are there any demographic, any background factors that affect their tendency to adopt innovations into their practices? And the purpose of all of this is to see whether or not these background factors do influence innovation adoption in medical practice, and if so, quantify them. Because we see a lot of this falls under the realm of implementation science, which is a new field that started about 2007, 2008. And this all falls into, okay, we know that this exists, but how do we quantify it so we can use it and make things better? So my research model, very simple. We have innovation adoption. Do these three affect? Once upon a time, there was a version that there was other things and they were connecting to each other, but because, and this is one of the reasons I'm pursuing doctoral training, it's not to be a big picture guy. I want to look at the minutia and start from the ground up and be a little more granular. So we're looking at whether or not somebody's gender their specialty, and their medical degree, country of origin are these affecting predictors. So the first hypothesis is that physicians who undergo residency training in what are deemed as technical, procedurally dense specialties, they will be more likely to adopt innovations into their medical practice than those who are trained as generalists. And this is based on research from Dr. Fryman back in 1985. And it seems like the trends were continuing. One change in our model that we did make was that OBGYN physicians, they were originally considered to be technical in the paper in 85. However, they were moved over to be non-technical because at the time there was a lot of Roe v. Wade issues happening. And so they felt a lot of physicians were not being innovative because they were afraid of litigation, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later. But this is the data set that we're going to be talking about happened in 2019, so pre-reversal of Roe v. Wade. It's been decades. And so OBGYN, that was the one change that we made. Those physicians were put under the procedurally dense technical because that fear of litigation is not as prevalent as it was when this research paper was done. Our second hypothesis are looking at those international medical graduates, or I'm going to call them IMGs from now on because it's easier to say. Looking at IMGs, so those who graduated from medical schools in other countries, but they came and were able to get into residency programs here. These physicians are going to have a lower likelihood of adopting innovative procedures compared to physicians who graduated from medical schools here in the US, but that is due to increased placement in non-technical residency programs. The reason I make that caveat is because if we look at what we were talking about just moments ago with attraction selection, you would be led to believe, oh, they have a different background than the other people who graduated from United States medical schools. Of course, they're going to have diverse outcomes if we're following this train of thought. However, there is a bias against IMGs that has been shown in peer-reviewed research. And this bias, one of the biggest offenders, this was shown in the research made by Shutt. It is unfortunate these people are scoring near the top percentile, as high as you can on the entrance, the STEP exams for you to become board certified. And yet, because they graduated from a medical school outside of the US, they're being placed in community service, community-based residency programs, wherein they are unable to have resources that higher tier residency programs have. And thus, they are put into the non-technical residency fields. And that would be overriding their IMG status. And then the final hypothesis that we have here are that female physicians will have the ability to adopt innovations in their medical practice, because through the research we were able to see, regardless of certain backgrounds and even the IMG, being a female physician consistently showed females do things differently. Females are more diverse. And so the idea, the educated guess for this hypothesis was that they would survive the attraction selection framework so that they could lead their teams, like these amazing Avengers, into bigger and better outcomes. And so how we did the data analysis, we looked at three variables that the data set that I was able to get from the Center of Medicaid Services had available. And these were the specialties for physicians, their gender, the reported gender, and the country, whether or not they got their medical degree from either the United States or they got it from a different country. And we correlated that against their CPT codes. And what a CPT code is, if you're familiar, if you've ever had to go to a mechanic to get your car fixed, sometimes they'll say, oh, let me check the book to see what the book says, how much this will cost and how long it'll take you to fix it. And so a CPT code is kind of like that for a physician. It lists all of their procedures and says how much the physician will get paid. But this is a way that is tracking every year, every procedure that a physician is doing. So being able to get that access to that data for all physicians in 2019, we're able to start making some connections or see if there are any connections. So this is one of the pieces that took me the longest to do because it was so difficult. I had two different data sets from the year 2019. There was the Physician National Database that had some of their demographic factors, and then there was the top bill procedure spreadsheet that had all of their procedures that they performed in the year 2019. And for some reason, SPSS hated both of those spreadsheets. So for a good chunk of them, I had to manually assign, hey, there's this physician's name and their data, and here's their procedures that they did. And so we were combining them together so that we could run some quantitative studies. Specifically, we looked at chi-square tests, logistic regressions, and multicollinearity tests. So the tools I utilized for the first part, because SPSS hated those spreadsheets, and that was fun. I got very proficient with Excel, and I went through, I cleaned all the data there. I coded some of the data to make sure that we had some consistency there. You can see the codes that I used there. So every specialty that was deemed a technical specialty was given a 1. Every one that wasn't was a 0. Standard procedures were put in as a 0, and innovative ones were put in as a 1. And how I was able to determine whether they were innovative or not is that in the CPT system itself, there are 2 classifications. There can be a category 1 CPT, which is older than 5 years, and just something that's been around and people accept as the standard. And there are new ones that are waiting to become category 1. They're category 3 CPTs. And these codes are younger than 5 years. And that is younger than 5 years as a procedure that is vetted for a physician to use. So it's not counting all the process that it went through to go through the FDA and all the other regulatory bodies to get it. So it's a tried and true procedure. It just within the past 4.9 years, it's been now made available and ready for a physician to use. And so I went through and cleaned and labeled the data. I merged those amazing data sheets that I will have nightmares with for the rest of my life. Computed the descriptive statistics, ran chi-square tests to get some different results, and we'll talk about those here in just a moment. So for the descriptive statistics, we were able to get the CPT data for all of the top billed, there's 5 top billed procedures for every specialty in the United States in 2019. I specifically picked 2019 because it is the closest year that we had pre-pandemic. Things have changed since the pandemic and certain behaviors, and so I didn't want that to be another confounding factor in this thing. So of that, we were, after everything was whittled down, I eliminated physicians who either didn't have all of the specifications, or they were, this one took a long time too. They were listed as physicians, but when you look into the credentials, they weren't physicians. They were like physician assistants or nurse practitioners, and some of them were scattered in, so that took a while. But we were able to get about 72% of the physicians in the data set of about 209,000 physicians were male, with 63% of all the physicians in the pool coming from non-technical specialties. Those are the specialties that are, according to existing literature, not going to be prone to innovative procedures in their practice. With the technical specialties themselves, those who are prone to being more innovative, nearly 39% of them were males. And then of female physicians, only 31% of female physicians were in these technical specialties. And I'm just going to jump down to the next highlighted part, because this is a big takeaway from here. Even though, and this is before any like deep statistical analysis, even though females tended to be in non-technical specialties, they still outperformed male physicians when it came to choosing innovations in their practice, which, I mean, technically, no pun intended, the deck was stacked against them. They were in fields that would not have them be innovative, and yet they still chose to do more innovative procedures. Now, I mean, we're going to go into the statistics. So to verify if this outward thing that we're seeing, this phenomenon, this event, is statistically sound, or is it maybe just an illusion? We're not sure. But so far, it's looking really good that the hypothesis might be significant. We also, in all of these, between all those physicians, there were 791,000 procedures that were performed between these 200,000 physicians. The grand majority of them were standard. And one of the things that, it was a funny thing, it shocked me when I saw it. 72% of the procedures done during the year 2019 in this data set were, those 72% of the physicians did not perform one new innovative procedure. Everything they did was standard protocol, and they didn't do anything outside of the norm. I was thinking, I thought maybe one, not even one. It shocked me. But then I was talking to some of my physician colleagues, as well as some people who are on the physician training pathway. And they all said, oh, that makes sense to me. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. It's way into the system. It's, I'm going into qualitative things that aren't part of this study, but it's very fascinating to see the reactions and how anecdotally they agreed and they weren't shocked by this. So we're going ahead and looking here to some of the statistics that I have. So we see here that for the chi-square results between these two variables, that the tests are approaching a count of 25,000. So that means that they should be valid, because the minimum threshold to make this test viable is 5. So that there's no issues there saying, oh, is this going to be a valid result or not? Our Pearson chi-square value is significantly higher than what is indicated for a degree of 1. So that is good news. You can see an association existing between these variables. As expected, the adjustment from the continuity correction did not change anything because of the size of our sample, meaning there was a high likelihood ratio that was further suggesting that there was a significant relationship. And we look at the linear by linear as well. All of these things are saying, hey, you know what? We're seeing a significant relationship between these variables. And I went and I did a chi-square test for every combination of the variables. So right here you have, what is the inclination of your specialty? Is it going to be standard? Is it going to be technical or non-technical? What type of degree did you get? Was it a US-based degree, meaning an MD or a DO, or were you an IMG? And we have here, what type of CPT did you perform? Was it innovative or was it standard? And we correlated, we cross-tabulated with the chi-square test, all of these with gender, all of the different variables that we had. And every single one of them came out as looking to be significant, which is great news. Sorry, I'm catching up. I realized I was pushing forward on the slideshow that was not shared to everybody. But so then we go down here to our logistic regression. So here all the variables in the study were binary. They weren't continuous or anything. So we're doing a logistic regression here to ascertain a little bit deeper how strong these relationships are. And according to this result here, each of the variables do appear to have a significant relationship with the likelihood of innovation adoption, because we see their p-values right here says significant. All of them are low. That does suggest, according to the statistic model, that the relationship that we guessed and we were thinking about in our theories was correct. If you also look at the exponent B column, all of those are around the number 1, which also, well, they're low. So that also suggests that there is a strong relationship, generally speaking. They have large walled outputs and small standard errors. Also, all of these, in the end, for those of you who are out there and don't know statistics, everything is shown so far that, hey, we're thinking that your hypotheses might have a strong correlation here. So then we were talking about it, and there was one specific relationship that we wanted to see. So we ran another logistic regression, And that was, we made a derived variable of gender by specialty. And this one is such an amazing finding. The study is showing that you can be in a specialty, but if you are a female in a specialty, just being a female in your specialty increases the likelihood that you are going to be innovative. It doesn't matter if you were in a non-technical or technical specialty. It was gender that had a bigger influence on specialty outcomes, and not the other way around. My gut intuition would have been, if this was something I thought to hypothesize ahead of time, it would have been, oh, it's the specialty, and that's what would amplify things. But no, it's being from a marginalized group, not being able to assimilate, and then harnessing, even unconsciously, harnessing that diversity and using it to improve your patient's healthcare outcomes. So outside of the boring numbers, here's a graph showing that relationship. And so we see here with a technical field, the dotted line, the closer you get to female, the higher likelihood you have to be innovative, which again, remember, 38% of males were in innovatively inclined fields, but only 31% of females. So that's how strong the relationship is. Okay, and so just to explain for some who might not know what a multicollinearity test is. First of all, it's a mouthful. But what happens is if you have variables that are so highly correlated, it can perhaps artificially inflate some of the numbers that we've already seen. So we do this test to make sure and clean things up and make sure, okay, is everything looking sound? And we want to focus on here, after all these numbers, the big numbers we want to focus on here are at the end, the VIF, the variance inflation factor, and they're all hovering at about 1. There's one down here that's a little bit higher, but it's still in the 1 range. Generally speaking, that shows you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Your numbers are sound, and you can be confident that your hypotheses were significant with all the other numbers that we see here. Which I remember when we first got all this, and I was suggested to look for the VIF, and it came out statistically sound. And my wife came in because she heard something from the office and said, "What's going on?" I was like, "It's working. The hypotheses, they're a strong suggestion that the relationship is true." So the conclusions that I came from all of this were that the previous studies that were looked up on in this literature review that we did, they were supported. The attraction selection framework did work in this unique way, this unique perspective that was hypothesized that it would, that there are certain background factors that get deleted once you enter into a certain organizational framework. But because of oppression and discrimination or other items that make people not forget who they were before they joined, they survive and they're able to be implemented into the groups, and that diversity can spark amazing innovations. And that is coupled along with the theory of kind behavior as well, diverse leadership, and how the diversity in leadership improves outcomes. And also that there's a lot of research showing that US graduated physicians tend to have better outcomes on the whole than those who graduated outside of the United States. But just like it says here at the end, it adds to the effects of bias on physicians. It's not the fault a lot of times of these IMGs. It's because they're biased against for various reasons, and not given the chance, even with high test scores, to go into residency programs that will allow them to flourish. But that females in the field, they're able to use their diversity and help improve outcomes. And generally speaking, overall, we found that even though there are a lot of different variables that do exist, that we did not take into account in here, these variables do have an effect. The relationship does exist, and this can lead to future research where we can go into a qualitative mode to ask questions and to dig deeper into, okay, what are some of the outside variables of specifically why these exist. Also for this study, the data set that was, the data sets that were granted by the Center of Medicaid Services, they did not have anything on race. They did not have the IMG's countries of origin, or whether or not they were practicing physicians before coming to the United States. And perhaps that could add more to why they behave certain ways. And that's something that I full well intend on diving into and researching moving forward to see why that is. And especially with race and sexual orientation, I, at the moment, hypothesize that we're going to see similar findings there that we did for female physicians. And we saw a lot of hidden variables. There are financial considerations. A lot of my exploratory interviews, physicians were saying, oh, one of the reasons I don't explore innovations in my practice is because my clinic can't afford it, or I'm not business trained, so I don't want to have to do a case report to prove to management why this is going to work. So there are limitations here. However, limitations did not take away from the fact that these relationships that were found in the data set do exist, and they do influence the overall outcomes. Now it's just more digging in deeper, finding out why, and also what are some of the practical implications from this. The theory of client behavior, we can use this to help have interventions. One of my long-term goals is to make a sort of a decision matrix for healthcare management members to use, so that they can use the data like, okay, my physicians come from this background, this background, this background. Are they, in the end, are they going to be innovatively inclined or not? And if they aren't at the moment, they can be. Intervention in healthcare and in other professions has been shown to help guide people in the workforce to different directions. And so we can use this to, in the field of healthcare management, to help incentivize and even move physicians who are not yet innovatively inclined to be, so that patients can have better health outcomes. And the same with the attraction selection framework. Residency program directors and their admissions committees can look to see if they have inadvertent institutionalized biases in their programs, and see, are we stopping people who technically do qualify for our programs and will flourish? Are we allowing them? Or are we putting them in places where they don't belong because their interests are not there, but that's where they're being placed because of our bias, and not allowing them to grow and flourish, and letting everybody here in the United States benefit from their diverse backgrounds. So the future research is basically everything I've been talking about. I hope to dig into all that, have a full CBT data set, not with just the top 5 procedures from every specialty, but every single procedure done, and looking at these different hidden variables that are contributing and helping explain a bigger picture of how all of these factors are impeding and contributing to this 17-year gap in innovation adoption. I'd like to give a huge shout out to Dr. Getty and Dr. DiVincenzo. Your guidance, mentorship, and influence in this study has been life-changing. Really gave me a love for research, and I want to continue working in research for the rest of my life. And I really appreciate your influence, the amazing support from LeBow College's faculty and staff, a couple of late sessions with Perry sitting and talking about things, and yeah, I really appreciate all of your support. And of course, my family. I'm glad that my immediate family was able to come out and support in all this, and I appreciate all of you out there who are watching, listening, as well as being okay with hearing some babies crying in the background. I appreciate your patience there as well. So yeah, that's what I have prepared, and I look forward to learning more from your questions and clarifying anything.
Questions for Joseph?
I have a question. This is great. Women in the world.
Yes. Yes.
And so I love it. So just a quick check. You might have touched on this before, clarify. So were the non-technical services, places, right? Those are the two things. There's technical specialties or non-technical. And you're comparing, so in the, just comparing from the two types of specialties, were the innovative practices and procedures numerically more? So that in some ways, was there a tendency to have more innovative practices and procedures higher or greater in non-technical practice?
Yes, the data, and so for those who didn't hear, the question was whether, the data showed that technical specialties performed more innovative procedures than non-technical.
So it's the opposite.
And no, it was, oh, so you were wanting to see if,
So the actual occurrence of, innovative procedures is greater in technical
yes,
specialties?
yes. So technical specialties had a higher occurrence of, innovative procedures.
And what you're finding is that in the first place, women, that there are fewer women in technical
Correct.
specialties. So there are more women in non-technical specialties. And in spite of being in a tough place where there are no innovative,
They still performed more, yeah. And, if you really think about it, if more females were in technical fields, we would have even more innovative procedures done.
so very simple question. I'm sure you, I was one of the terrified that just magnify the finding in my own life.
Right.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
The data and analysis that you've done. And I do find the finding intriguing. Sometimes it's kind of intuitively, okay, it makes sense. Here you have interesting set of lines where female make a difference, right? In the field. And the reason it's so intuitive is because they also know to be risk averse.
Yeah.
Here in this field, it seems like they're willing to take the risk and adopt innovation. So the question is, how do you explain that?
Yeah, that's my question too. That's what I was gonna ask you, because there's like some research that shows that men are more assertive, they're, you know, it is common. I don't love it.
Yeah, no.
And just as a background, my daughter is like taking the
Hey, congratulations. Yeah.
but still, it's curious that.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I want to move forward and do some qualitative to not just have my assumptions and guesses. But, one of the things I felt, is that it's unconscious. They're doing things differently and they're, just, more aware and more conscious of things and not going into, it's in motor behavior, you go into expert mode and you just do what you're trained to do. But because they're not fully, this is my guess, they're not fully able to assimilate, then they're not always in expert mode in autopilot. And so then they're able to say, okay, what should I do in this situation? And so then they go and they pick what is best for the patient at the time, and instead of just, what is my specialty tell me to do right now?
It's kind of socialization is that if they are already, and I think this is probably true in the medical field, is they are already so much the other
Yeah,
that they don't feel some function to go along with the current situation.
yeah.
So if you're already outside, you go in and be more outside. Make sense?
Oh, that makes perfect sense, yeah. So anyway, kind of attraction, selection, attracting to be outside.
Be outside a lot.
Right, yeah. Which is great, I mean, and the sad thing is like you saw with, Dr. Princess Dinar, it was leading her to be more innovative in what she was doing, and she's actually, fighting for equal rights, which is fantastic. But it's sad that it's these negative, horrible biases and oppression that is leading to these great outcomes.
Anyone from Zoom, either write this question in chat or go ahead and unmute yourself. If there are no other questions, then, the faculty group, where we'll head out, to discuss things, and then we'll come back.
Thank you all so much. Really needs to feel your faces here and there's many things more for you really to share. Yeah.
Hey, Joseph, it's Jody. Congratulations. Good job.
Hey, George, it's been a while. How are you doing, man? Thank you.
Good job. I know it's a lot of work. We've all been there. Good job. You did a great job. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jody. I'm hoping for the best.
Good job, Joseph. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you, Chichu. I really appreciate that.
Hey, Joseph, good job. Mommy is so proud. You did beautifully.
Thanks, Mom. I like this. What did you do? You know, I watched yours earlier today, knocked it out of the park. Ah,
They made me sweat.
I have no idea. Oh, I'm still scared. It's not done yet. Well, yes, Dr. Cleveland, what was that? Oh.
Did you put it on mute? I cannot hear you anymore.
Yes, Mom, I had muted it, but I will unmute it. I just didn't want
Oh,
to
okay.
give our conversations.
Okay.